Today, I'm joined by Cathrin Johansson, CEO of MedVasc, a company developing a new approach for treating varicose veins through a catheter-based delivery of local anesthesia. Her path is a strong example of what it takes to commercialize a focused, high-impact medical device in a crowded global market. In the episode, we talk about bringing a catheter device to market, the decision to prioritize the US first, and why regulatory momentum matters for startups fighting with limited resources. We also get into the realities of raising capital, building trust with investors, and navigating the push and pull between clinical need, regulatory timing, and commercial urgency. Cathrin also breaks down how she approaches leadership in a small team, how MedVasc is preparing for market entry, and what founders often underestimate when bringing a device from prototype to patients. Good morning, Cathrin. Would you like to start by introducing yourself and telling us about the current progress and status at MedVasc?
Yeah, okay. So my name is Cathrin Johansson. I'm the CEO of MedVasc. I've been with the company for the last 3 years. I did not found the company, so we have a founder. His name is Dr. Mikael Åkesson, and he is a physician. He has several clinics where he treats patients who suffer from varicose veins or venous insufficiency. So what we do at MedVasc is that we have developed a medical device that is going to be used to deploy local anesthesia before you treat varicose veins. So we're basically a next generation product supporting a $1 billion market that's already existing with laser and RF fiber. So we just improve the process basically. And we are around 1 year from the market, so we're just finalizing the last bench tests, animal test, and clinical test before filing the submission for FDA 510(k). And we expect to have that in 1 year roughly, so next autumn, ready to launch in the US first.
That sounds like excellent progress. So my first question is, why the US first?
Yeah, I think you can ask 100 of medtech companies and you would get a similar answer, at least if they're based in the EU. So for us, we've been around for quite a long time. So it was a decision that was made before I entered the company. So they basically wanted us to go to market fast. And at that time, it was like the MDR regulations were all, like nobody knew anything what was actually going to happen. So the US first approach made sense. We also have a lot of natural connections with the US in our board. So it's also, there's a lot of reason that makes sense for us to go there. It's a very similar market. It's 80% of the treatments are done in private clinics that are owned by the physicians themselves. So in that point of view, we have a very different market situation because these are quite small entities and it's the physicians themselves that decide what they want to use when treating the patient. So we don't need to go to the hospitals and have these long procurement processes. So it's a bit different. And but the US makes sense, and the EU market is quite fragmented when it comes to implementation. So US is 45% of the market, and they speak one language, and you know the drill. There's a lot of reasons to go to the US. And then, of course, knowing that the FDA approval would also immediate open doors in markets like China, Singapore, Hong Kong, where you can basically just harvest with a distribution deal or something like that.
Very good answers and solid justification. I think MedVasc is not alone in that approach. It's becoming more and more common, right?
Yeah, and also in hindsight, I mean, this decision was taken. But then, if you look at from like a fundraising perspective, if you have a plan for the US, it's so much easier because you have these FDA pre-submission meetings where you get signed off meeting minutes, you get written feedback in before the meeting, so you can adjust your questions, so you can adjust your answers, so you can go deeper in the conversation in the meeting with the FDA, and you get this, as I said, signed off written meeting minutes, which you can use when you plan, so you have something that justify your regulatory pathway that is actually validated by the FDA when you talk to the investors. So instead of just guessing, or like the black box that maybe the notified bodies are at the moment, at least what I've heard, I haven't heard from any startup that have felt that the EU process was clear or transparent at all. So, I mean, investors want to know what's the timeline, when can we expect things to be done, what is need to be done, and what is nice to be done. Because obviously, if you had tons of money, you would do so much testing so that you have so much data to prove what you're doing is great. But then you want to trust the team to only do what's needed, because everything is expensive, to only do what's needed until you have the regulatory approval. So I think that FDA helps to build trust between the startup and the investor side.
Is the US first pathway more attractive because of those clear differences between the American and European healthcare? It's so much more clearly profit-orientated and operates as a competitive business environment, whereas the EU has a more kind of universal coverage, public funding, and tightly regulated private players. What do you think makes the companies choose the US market first?
Yeah, I don't know the reasons or the intentions behind the processes, but what I've heard, like back in the days, everyone was afraid of the FDA. But so they actually like reworked their whole processes. So they wanted to become more approachable. They wanted to have communication in early stage so that all stakeholders could understand what's expected. So that, there will not be any conflicts at the end of the day, because people invested so much in data that were not necessarily needed. And I don't understand why it's more like complicated in the EU. But if you look at other businesses, like in the tech sector or whatever, I do believe that a lot of EU regulation is actually very good and protecting us as citizens. With that said, I would love for EU to have like a short, like the 510K that we are applying for, because that basically means that if there is a similar product to your own, you can just point at that and you're expected to do the same testing and the same data that they did. So that makes everything much more easier. It's crystal clear, and they also have this like a bullet point list. Like if you have a device in this class, we expect you to do this and this. So it's instead of like a small startup trying to figure out themselves what needed, they actually have good guidance.
Looking at Sweden's medtech ecosystem, do you feel like it's actually designed for getting companies into the market and to succeed? Be successful?
I almost want to answer, don't get me started. because I do feel that we have a really good support system. I do feel that we have a really good tradition of R&D and development stage and everything like that. But when it comes to commercialization and actually making businesses out of the inventions we created, I think that there's so much left to do. I think it's and it feels like the startups know this. At some point, if they survive until commercialization stage, they will know this. And then we have the investor side that also will learn this if they don't already know this, that it's very hard to commercialize in Sweden. So that makes the startups, that make them go abroad. And I mean, to me, it sounds much easier if you could start in your own hometown, in your own whatever, like have your first customers where you are most comfortable. But I do think that the solution comes from the outside. I think that this is a political problem. I do think that we all know that we live in, at least in Sweden, we have these regional budgets, and they are always super deficiency in the budget. So I know that a lot of startups, they have proof basically that they can save time, they can save money and all this stuff, and still are not being implemented. So I do think that if I had one thing to wish for, I would wish for the politician, like from the top, to actually expect that if you're responsible for any budget that has to do with health, you need to choose at least 3 inventions each year that can lower the cost in your regional budget. It's not that complicated. And there are innovations that basically the staff don't even need to be involved for it to be implemented. So it's, I mean, we have this, there's a startup from Stockholm, Symego, who was actually founded by a physician because he was so frustrated that there were so many operation times that were cancelled. So he had a lot of free time each day, but he knew that the queues were so long, and he actually invented this schedule system. So nobody need to do anything. Everything is super automated, and they can shorten the time to procedure. I don't remember how much, but very fast. And this has been adopted by a lot of private-owned clinics, and also now with NHS, they are doing a big job. So I don't understand. We have this great invention in Sweden. We have this problem. Why is it not just being plugged in? I even tagged like our regional tech responsibilities in the region, because I think it's their responsibility. Someone needs to do it. And I think since they are not doing the best of the job they can do, they need to have push from the top.
Top-down decision-making and policy creation, that drives adoption.
100%. Because it doesn't make sense. It's not a charity case. It's actually our tax money that going to the drain. And also so many private persons taking risks with building these startups and creating fantastic opportunities to have a better healthcare, and also for us taxpayers to save some money. But maybe we should make a riot. Maybe it's our responsibility and not the politicians.
As a CEO and as a stakeholder in a medtech company, what do you think about the valley of death? How do you navigate it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think either I have to think of the company as we have been in the valley of death for 10 years, because it's a long development process, and until you have sales, you have nothing, basically. You only have intellectual property and stuff like that. So either you look at it as it has been going on for forever, basically, or you look at it at we're entering the valley of death. Because I do feel like we're still in development. Until we have the FDA approval, all people or companies that are investing in us, they are investing in a development company, basically. And I think that the hard part, I do think that the hardest part will come when we have the FDA approval and we need to prove the sales, and we will need to have working capital to do that. because I do think that there's a lot of naivety that goes into, well, you have the product, just start selling, but sales cost. So I think that is when we will face, depending on how the fundraising will go for that sprint, depending if we will have money in the bank or not. If we don't have enough money, then we will definitely face tough challenges, because I think it's people understand that there needs to be investment in bench testing or in clinical trial or whatever. But when it comes to sales, I think there's an idea but you can do it yourself in one way, because the money seems to be not that critical. And I mean, if you're lucky enough to have quite a quick adaptation, then that will obviously be much more easier. Or, I mean, in our case, we work hard to get some kind of upfront deal, because we have a product that is feasible to sell globally, basically. So anything that can help to create a reality where we can actually invest in the sales properly would be good, because until you're there, you're not there.
It has been a very strange few years with COVID and the market struggles. A lot of expectation was put onto health tech, but we haven't seen that widespread adoption and modernization we'd hoped for. Getting accurate and fair valuations for companies and raising capital has never been easy, but it is a very challenging market right now, especially for disruptive technologies entering the market.
Yeah, and I think it's so good that you point that out, because I do feel it's also with it, talking about investments in general, and I feel like it's not the startups who's the problem. There's a lot of, looking at the context, I mean, I still see initiatives where they want us to develop, be better, present your case, whatever. But I do feel like if it's someone who needs education or need to organize themselves, it's the investor side. Because as you say, they have spiraled into unrealistic expectations. Everyone is not lowering the bar, rather higher the bar. And I think it's they need to get the shit together, because it's affecting all of us, that it's a moving target. We need to know how they will react on different metrics, but we cannot really do that because, and I think, it's sad to hear when you point out not even sales, because I mean, I can understand that you think that sales is not enough or whatever, but I do feel like if you have sales, at least you have more traditional, you can go to a bank, you can go to Almi or whatever, because if you have sales, you have at least something to show for that you didn't have when you were in a development stage. And I think that's a game changer, but I think everything has changed so much, given that there's so much uncertainty, and I don't believe that anyone is really willing to admit that they are actually, what they need is psychological safety, and investing in startups is generally not full of psychological safety. So it gives a lot of pressure on us to actually try to create that. But still, we can only, it's a relationship. We can only do as much as we can to be transparent and to showcase our future plans, whatever. But if the investor side is not doing their job, it's like having a really unhealthy relationship with the person. You cannot really thrive together if not both parts are acting as they actually have good intentions for the relationship. And if the person you are having as a stakeholder, if they are constantly looking at other things and looking at the grass is greener over there and maybe there, but I mean, with those startups, they would never get on the cap table because they are not in that context of investing. So there's a lot of self-reflection and scrutiny to be done among investors. Because obviously everyone would like to work with the unicorns, but some of them they have to settle with us. We're the best that they can get.
I think you have a very good track record of raising capital, especially with MedVasc. So what makes a medtech company investable in beyond just the core IP?
I think the interesting part, I didn't know that much about life science at all before entering MedVasc, but I think that actually with MedTech and medical device, it's a bit simpler. It's harder, of course, because you need a lot of money and it takes time and everything like that. But the thing is that the components, the milestones that you need to reach, they are not exactly similar for every company, but they are on a high level. There is an understanding. If someone has invested in medical device before or medtech before, they know that, okay, you need to have regular pathway, you need this, you need that. And I mean, so you have this, you can have this checklist. At the end of the day, a case is perfect if you have all this. And that makes it quite easy to have conversation, to know but we're in the beginning of the journey. We are here, or we are here. And the more understanding you have of that final, perfect, packaged, when you're at commercialization stage, if you understand all the steps you need to go, then you can have good conversations. And I mean, you don't need to be perfect because everyone understands that there are different stages of the journey. So I think you can be investable in all stages, but it's super much harder in the beginning because then it's maybe only an idea and you have this everything up against you. So the more evidence you can gather, like IP, anything, as I mentioned, the pre-submission meeting with the FDA, that's a very simple thing to actually understand what's the regulatory pathway, because then you can try to understand how much will that cost in the end. And so it's basically just try to understand which milestones or which evidence can we collect that will actually make us interested. And of course, looking at the market, and also the context where you're in. I mean, for us, we have no software, we have no AI. So you can imagine, there's so many investment firms that will never look at us. In one way, that makes it easier because then I don't need to talk to them either. But it's also if you have something that are very, very trendy, good for you. then you will get their attention. But if you don't have, then you will have to, find your way to make the story interesting. And I think for everyone working within a startup or being a founder, whatever, you want to have a clear picture of the potential business case because it's your life. You are investing time. So it's not for the investors only. It's for you to actually get motivated and feel okay, this is the actual potential. And you can start, if it's one thing you can start very, very early on, is to make assumptions about the market size, about market adoption and the potential, make some financial projections just to try and showcase what you're actually trying to build here. Likewise, Will.
I could talk to you about this for hours, but we have just time for 2 more questions. So, what would you say would be the biggest challenge for MedVasc now? What are the hurdles that are left for you to succeed?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you ask me that, because this will sound so, naive, but I do think that the testing that we're doing now, I'm not worried about that, the bench testing, because this is our 4th generation, so we have been doing bench testing before with very similar product, similar material, or everything. So I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about like the animals, and we will do 15 human patients as well, because we have been in patients before. So we don't really have any worry around those activities that are left. But then we have this one hurdle, and it's the commercialization, because there are reimbursement codes for treatment of varicose veins. So there are reimbursement codes for those processes that we are compatible with and support. But we don't have our own reimbursement code. So obviously this is if we would have that, then the physician would just like use it like a natural thing to do. Now, since we don't have that, we will need to go to market anyway, because and that creates another kind of narrative. But there are other products in the industry that have been introduced to the market without reimbursement code, that have had several million of dollars in sales the first years, only from patients paying out of pocket. So I do believe that this is our biggest hurdle, to actually try and understand what would the patient be willing to pay for our product, to actually have a pain-free experience. Because we have only tested the pricing with the physicians who own the clinics, but it's different if they will take the cost, and it's different if the patient will be willing to take the cost. So I think this is like the one most interesting question we have ahead. And I think it's also interesting because it feels like it has potential. And then, of course, when we're in the market, it will be a priority to get data so that we can get included in the guidelines also with data, not only included because we're existing. So, but reimbursement, I will say.
That's a great answer. So that leaves one last question. If you had the power to change one thing in the industry, whether it was structural, funding, regulations, anything, what would you change?
Yeah, it would definitely be adoption. I think if we solve that, then the investors would be much more likely to invest, because everyone is afraid of investing in something that will not exist in the future. So the more we can be reassured that if you save money for the health system, if you save time, or if you make it better for the patient, then there is actually a system that will adopt your product. Then if everyone could feel safe with that reality, I think that we would have a totally different, because now, I mean, a couple of years ago, investors were investing in like health tech that could be very, very, like on an intellectual level, you can feel like, yeah, this would make great sense to have. But then, I mean, look at all those preventive care solutions, like, obviously, it would be very good to have those implemented, but there are so many startups that struggle to actually get. So I think the investors have learned the hard way that it's at least the Swedish market doesn't feel ready for implementation or adoption of new technologies. That's why we need to force them.
That is a perfect way to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Cathrin. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today.
Pleasure talking to you, Will. I'm so happy I got to spend some time with you again.
That's it for this episode of Walk the Valley. Talking with Cathrin gave us a sharp look in what it takes to bring a niche medical device to the market and stay focused when the resources, timelines, and paths all compete for your attention. Her story is a reminder that traction in medtech isn't only about clever engineering, it's about clarity on clinical value, a strategy that matches the realities of each market, and leadership that can hold the line through long development cycles. If this conversation gave you something useful, hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps us bring more grounded lessons from the medtech trenches to founders and innovators. Thanks for listening, and let's keep walking the valley together.